Good morning to you. Welcome to eThursday. I am actually, well, it's only 2 minutes early because we're expecting tilers to arrive here quite soon, hopefully, but there might be a little bit of noise and we'll have to see how it goes. So I've moved to a different area of the house, hoping that it's going to be quiet here. So let me know when you join in. Please say hello in the comments. Tag your friends to join in. I have such an encouraging word for you today. Last Thursday, yep, I see I am live. Last Thursday, Wendy Lee, good to see you. 100 points for you for being number one. And there is somebody else here. Last week I spoke, Colleen Swartz, nice to see you too. Last Thursday, I spoke about making room for God. And I think I read the scripture just to make sure that I read it, because my notes for online sessions go from the top of the page all the way down to the bottom, and I'm not sure if I read everything. Jennifer Gallard, good to see you. I hope you're looking after my babies, my grandbabies. I'm sure you are. Okay, so I think I read the scripture to you. Ephesians 1:11 and 12 in the Message. Gillian Ann Miles, nice to see you. It's in Christ that we find out who we are and what we are living for. Long before, yes, I read it, we first heard of Christ and got our hopes up. He had his eye on us, had designs on us for glorious living, part of the overall purpose he's working out in everything and everyone. Okay, so I'm going to finish last Thursday's message. If you didn't hear it, I spoke about the Shunammite woman and how she received the prophecy from the prophet, and it's in 2 Kings chapter 4, and she received a prophecy. I just want to find it here. Elisha calls her to the door and says, about this time next year you shall embrace a son. And so the son was born, and we left the story right there last week. Jennifer Gallard, please give Lily and Olive big squeezes from me. I can't wait to see them again. I'll chat to you about that. I have such exciting news. This is me when it comes to dogs. There is a place in London that's called, I think it's called Kappa Pug. And our daughter Kelly, who now lives in Surrey with her husband, she has a thing for pugs. She always has loved pugs. So they found this coffee shop called Kappa Pug, where you can go spend 1 hour there with all these pugs. So anyway, it's my dream to go to, you know, when you see these videos on social media of people lying on the floor and all these puppies come and run and jump on them, and that's on my bucket list of being able to do that. And the only time I can do that is when I look after Matthew and Jessica's 2 dogs, Lily and Olive, and Jennifer's looking after them for a while now. So we are going to visit Kelly and Glenn very soon, and she's going to try and get us tickets to go to Kappa Pug. I'm telling you, I was so excited when I heard about that. I can't wait to see Kelly and Glenn, but to be in a coffee shop where you're surrounded by pugs. Just if we get tickets, I will send lots of photographs. So anyway, that'll actually be Thursday, 2 weeks from now. So just pray we get tickets to go to Kappa Pug for 1 hour to sit and drink coffee and have pugs all over the place. Can you imagine? Janine van Skalkwyk, good morning to you. I saw some other people joined in, Bianca Mears. Yeah, so I'll greet you all later. Now the reason I want to try and do this very quickly, we have tilers arriving. They're supposed to be here at 9, but yesterday they were supposed to be here at 9:30, and they only arrived at 10:30. So they have to come back today to do some finishing, some tiling in our bathroom. That's going to require some grinding and chopping. So if it gets too noisy when they do arrive, I might have to stop and then finish the message. So let's get into this. Wendy, I can always bring you my 3 and a cat and 2 parrots. I actually found, I looked out the window just now, there was a cat sitting in my front garden. But it's another one of those neighborhood cats that are nervous, obviously. So it saw me at the window, and as soon as I tried to open the front door quietly, it was gone. So maybe there's another cat that I can make friends with. Anyway, you all know why we can't have our own pets, and I'm a real pet person, is because we travel. But now we've found house sitters, and we might have to fight with Jennifer. We might have to arm wrestle with our kids to get Jennifer to house sit for us or whatever. So, but I think we're beyond the stage of getting pets right now. We're thinking about too much travel. Enough about pets before the Tylers arrive. Yeah, Bianca, thank you for favor. There is a special, this is why there's a special that if it's your birthday in the UK, on the day of your birthday, you get 3 tickets, free tickets, and you pay for, well, obviously there are 4 of us, so, and it's Kelly's birthday on the 21st, and it's her thing. So we would really love to go to Kapapug. Kelly, she knows how she knows what makes my day. But also because it's her birthday, she wants to go and spend an hour with the pugs. You can't book for more than an hour. I think maybe it was Wendy or Bianca, somebody said, I want 2 hours. You only get an hour slot. Anyway, I think that'll be long enough just to be surrounded by pugs. If you come to Constantia Mentoring on Saturday afternoons, there are 2 pugs, Lily and Poppy. And they walk around and they lick the cream or the fake tan off everybody's legs. We've all experienced it. And they sit at my feet sometimes, or at Rory's feet when we're talking. Good morning, Yvette Liebenberg. And they fall asleep in there. They've got a bed, and they both get into the bed, and they snore while we're preaching. So we're used to having pugs around. Dorleen, Valentine. I hope I'm seeing you on Saturday, Dorleen. We are going to have a great time on Saturday. I'm so excited. We're going to finish the message on obedience, identity, and we are going to talk about how poverty thinking is in direct opposition to prophetic. Anyway, that's for Saturday. Okay, so today, the promises you have are a threat to the enemy. The testimony you carry is a weapon of war. I see Tracy O'Neill there. Tracy O'Neill, I have been invited to PE. It's all still up in the air because it's around the time of the camp here in Cape Town, and some of the ladies want to come to the camp, and it might be too close, and so I'll let you know if I am coming to PE. Celeste Chambers, good morning. I hope you had a fantastic birthday yesterday. I think it was yesterday, today's the first day of your brand new season. You're not getting older, you're growing in wisdom and glory and grace and favor and influence, and all the wisdom that you have is going to help you in the season ahead of you. So, the promises you have are a threat to the enemy. The testimony you carry is a weapon of war. So let's go back to 2 Kings chapter 4. Now remember I said when the Tylers arrive, Rory's hanging around the house. They're already late, but when they arrive, if it gets too noisy, I will have to stop, and what I'll do is I'll record. When I hear them start to make a noise, maybe it won't be for a long time. There's not much that they have to do, and then you can just tell me it's too noisy. It won't really bother me, but if it's going to be too loud for you to hear above all the noise, then there's no point. So let's see how we go. 2 Kings chapter 4, remember, Elisha prophesied to the Shunammite woman, and as I said, if you're only joining in now, go back to last week's Thursday where I spoke about making room for God. So the Shunammite woman has received a prophecy from Elisha, and he says to her, about this time next year you shall embrace a son. And she said, no, my Lord, do not lie to your maidservant. That's a big symptom of poverty thinking. When somebody gives you a prophetic word, or you hear someone in the teaching say, God is going to do amazing things, you are called to do greater works, and you think, but who, me? No, not me, don't lie to me. This is what she said. Because for so long, this woman had waited for a child that she had actually pushed it aside and got on with life and been faithful doing what she knew to do. So when the promise came, she couldn't believe it. What she was saying is, this is too good to be true. But then it says in verse 17, but the woman conceived and bore a son when the appointed time had come, of which Elisha had told her. So some things happened here that we're going to look at. In verse 18, it says, and the child grew. So the child is not a baby anymore. By the time we get to verse 18 of 2 Kings chapter 4, the child has grown. Now it happened one day that he went out to his father, to the reapers. His father was working out in the field, and he said to his father, my head, my head. So he said to a servant, carry him to his mother. When he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon and then died. Now this is the promise that this woman had waited for so long. And then, according to Bible scholars, when this happened, he was about 2 years old. Maybe a little bit older than 2 years old, but not a baby. He was old enough to go out to his father into the field, which I think he'd probably older than 2, and to say to his father, my head, my head. And so some people say he had a stroke. Whatever it was, he died. He sat on his mother's knees till noon, and then he died. But what does this woman do? Does she pick up the phone and phone 911 or whatever we phone in South Africa, or we phone the church? Well, sometimes we don't even think of phoning the church. It's like emergencies, something terrible has happened. But now remember, this child represents a promise that God has given many of you, that you waited for a long time, and you came into a season of saying, you know, God saw your faithfulness, he saw your trust in him, and you received a promise. But then the enemy came along, and it says, if, now you know your promise can't die, but it says, if the devil has come in and robbed you left, right, and center, robbed you blind, after receiving the taste of something that God has promised you, and everything is upside down, the wrong way around, inside out, upside down. So what does she do? Because it's in this kind of situation, after this woman was faithful, she was a notable woman, she had made room for God, something on her was so evident that Elisha the prophet said, what can I do for you? Because you've been so good to us. What can I do for you? And I think last Saturday I said, when God says to you, what can I do for you? He knows what he could do for you. He knows what your desires are. He knows what his plans are. And he already has it planned. But he's waiting for you to acknowledge, I can't do this without your help. And also, he's wanting to shake your faith a bit when he says, what can I do for you? There's some things that many people have forgotten, or there are many things that some people have forgotten, both, that God has promised. Maybe there's some things that we have forgotten about our own nation that we've given up on, and all the great promises about the nation we live in, and we are saying, I don't know if this can happen anymore. And God comes along, what can I do for you? It's a reminder of, what have I said to you? You know, when God asks a question, he already knows the answer. But when he asks a question, it's his way of getting us into agreement with what he wants to do. And it's always better and bigger than we expect. So this woman, when she heard the question, what can I do for you? She didn't even remember that she wanted a son. Like, here was her opportunity. And it took Gehazi, Elisha's servant, to say, actually, she doesn't have a son and her husband is old. What he was saying was, she needs a miracle. Because her husband's old, she's given up, but you're saying, what can I do for you? Megan Hope, good morning to you. And so she received her promise, and the child grew. But now the child is dead. So it's what this woman does in this crisis moment that we can learn from, especially today. On Tuesday at the prophetic equipping evenings that Rory and I are doing, Rory spoke about, brought a fantastic message about being a man or a woman of God. And I was sitting at the back because I went outside to check on the gate outside. And as I sat at the back and I looked across everybody listening intently to Rory, I realized I had the sense of the Father's heart of God for his people. that there are many people in the church who are still trusting God for promises, but they're at the stage that Elijah was when he ran away from Jezebel in 1 Kings 19. He ran away from Jezebel after hearing the threat that Jezebel said, "You've killed my prophets, now by tomorrow at this time I'm going to do the same to you." And he ran away, and he found himself under the broom tree in the wilderness, and he used these words. He said, "It is enough now, Lord. Take my life. It is enough now, Lord." And I had the sense as I looked across the people from the back of the room that there are so many people who've been around for a long time, received the promises of God, believed them, stood their ground, trusted them, but now they're saying, "It's enough. I've waited for so long. The attacks have been so intense. I don't feel as if I have a place in the church anymore. I'm a relevant place in the church anymore. I'm just going through the motions, and it's enough now." And the grace of God being released for you and I in this season where we feel that we're at the end of ourselves and it's enough. So this is what happened with this woman now. Can you imagine? You get this promise, you're holding this child in your arms, and then a few years later, the child dies in your arms again. So what she did was, verse 21, she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, shut the door upon him, and went out. Then she called to her husband and said, "Please send me one of the young men and one of the donkeys, that I may run to the man of God and come back." She knew the man of God was the one who had given her this promise, and he was the one who held the answers about why, not so much why this has happened, but something inside of her believed that if this guy could give her a promise, prophets in the Old Testament were held in high esteem. She was the one who, at the beginning of 2 Kings 4 verse 8, she perceived something about Elisha. If I say Elijah, it's because I'm getting mixed up. Elisha, she perceived something about Elisha, that he was a holy man of God. She recognized, she discerned something about him, that he carried the presence of God. And she wanted to make room for this guy, which is why she got her husband to make an upper room so Elisha could stay there. And so she recognized in her time of need that the person who she had discerned something about would be able to turn the situation around the way it should be. Because even here in the Old Testament, this woman must have known, if God gives a promise, he intends for that thing to happen and to grow and to be fruitful and to multiply. There's a precedent set in the Word of God, right in the beginning in the book of Genesis, when God said to Adam and Eve, "Go forth and multiply." That word multiply doesn't mean just have a lot of babies and take over the whole world. In the translation of that word multiply comes the word be significant. Have influence, have an impact, change the world you live in, subdue, have authority over. And so this woman understood this principle that if she had received a promise from a prophet, it wasn't just for a few years and then the promise would be taken from her. So she went up, laid him on the bed of the man of God. She went right to the source. If you feel today as you're listening to me that you've received some promises from God, feels like they're not growing, nothing is happening, all hell has broken loose, you've got to go back to the source of the promise. You can't just sit back and say, "Oh, well, God said he's going to do it." You've got to go back to God. You've got to get persistent about it. You've got to believe the promise. We're going to look at that in a minute, believing the promise. Because the first reason this woman could be so persistent, and I'll give you the end of the story because you probably know, she got her son resurrected from the dead. But the first thing is she was so persistent, she didn't give up, because she said to her husband, "Why send me one of the young men, one of the donkeys? I want to go to Elisha and then come back. I don't just want to go there, hang out with him. I'm going to him with a purpose." But she didn't tell him. And he said to her, "Why are you going to him today? It's not the new moon or the Sabbath. It's not a festival time or a feast, not a festival. It's a feast. You don't have to go. What's your purpose?" She didn't tell him. Now remember, this is his son as well. She didn't discuss it with him. She didn't say, "Well, our son is dead on his room." Her answer tells the whole story. She says to her husband, "It is well." Now remember, she had taken the promised son, put him on the bed of Elisha, closed the door, left him in the upper room. And her response was, "It is well." Or in other words, it's okay, it's going to be okay, everything's fine now, you don't have to worry, it is well. You can't say that to the enemy, to people who question you, to your own heart, in the middle of opposition, if you don't go back to the source of the one who gave you the promise. You can't go to the prophet and say, you prophesied this to me. You can ask for advice, but you can't fight a battle with what the prophet says to you. It's got to be what has God said to you. Now, maybe that God used someone to prophesy to you, and that's become your weapon. But in the middle of a crisis, you don't have to go to the prophet and say, will you fight this battle with me? The promise was given to you personally. The prophet was just the messenger, the prophetic minister, whatever you want to call them, was the messenger who gave you what God said. So in the middle of a battle, you've got to be able to say, like, we don't have to be like this woman and leave our promise on the bed or wherever on your desk and run and fetch the prophet. You have to go straight to God. God, you have to know that God is the source of God is the one who gave you that promise that has become your weapon. So in the middle of a battle, we can phone the person who prophesied to us or talk to them and say, this is what you said, now what do I do? And maybe if you have a relationship with them, they can give you some wisdom and some advice, but they can't fight the battle for you. They were the messenger. It's like calling the postman back when you get a bill that's, he puts something in your post box, open it up and you see your whatever bill is double than what you normally pay. You don't run down the road after the postman and say, explain this to me. Can you help me? Can you contact these people? He'll say, that's not my job. Morning, Sophia Henriksen. Hope you are well over there in Europe. We don't do that with the postman. We contact the people who actually sent that bill out. It's the same as fighting for what God has promised us. We go straight to him. And then we invite him into the battle. He's waiting for us to say, it's okay, it is well, just like this woman said, it is well because God said. There's a but God said here. So she goes, she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, drive and go forward. Don't slacken the pace for me unless I tell you. In other words, let's get there quickly. And so she departed and went to the man of God at Mount Carmel. So it was, when the man of God saw her afar off, he said to his servant Gehazi, look, the Shunammite woman, this woman who's made an upper room for me, this woman who's fed me every time I come into the place, this notable woman, this woman who I gave a promise to her. He would have remembered things about this woman. She's the one who came and stood in the doorway, and I said to her, what can I do for you? And she didn't even believe me when I gave her a promise that she was going to have a child. But look, she had a child, but here she's coming again. Please run now to meet her and say to her, is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child? What does the woman do? She hears all these questions because the prophet himself doesn't know why she's coming. So Gehazi arrives with his list of, is it well? Is it well? Is it well? Maybe Elisha did pick up that there was something happening. Because remember, she had just said to her husband, it is well. So here again, she gets this not from the prophet, but from Gehazi, his servant. Is it okay? Is it well? He covers every area of her life. She doesn't discuss it with the servant. She wants to get straight to the source of the promise. And she says to Gehazi, it is well. She doesn't, it's the same thing she said to her husband. So on your journey, when you are trusting God for something and you feel like your vision has died, you are so discouraged, you feel hopeless, and people come to you and they say, what's going on? What about that thing God promised you? What's happening? Do you have the persistence that this woman has? Because you're still waiting to say, it's well. You know, we don't live in denial. We don't, I'm blessed, hallelujah, but everyone at home is sick and fighting and broke and whatever else. It is well, hallelujah. We've got to know who we can talk to. But firstly, we have to go straight to God. We discuss these things with God. We go back to God. We're so persistent. We knock on the doors. We say, God, this is what you said. I'm waiting for my but, God. I'm not going to discuss it with everybody else. I'm going to get the people I trust to pray with me, but I'm not going to sit and discuss all my problems. I'm going to keep on saying, it is well, because God said. You can't say it is well unless you know what God said. So sometimes in our persistence is a good thing to receive the promise. But in our persistence, we have to make sure that we are persistently believing the promise. We're not fighting to make things happen or fighting with everybody who disagrees with us. We're going to persist in believing the promise. So she says, it's well. And then she came to Gehazi and she says to him, she says, when she came to the man of God at the hill, she caught him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to push her away, but the man of God said, let her alone. I don't think this was a word of knowledge because she fell at his feet and she grabbed him by the feet. The man of God said, let her alone, for her soul is in deep distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me. So she said, this is what she said, did I ask a son of my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive me? You know, that kind of language, that happens when we are so discouraged in waiting for a promise, or we think God has taken it away, or the devil has robbed us, maybe the devil has robbed us, and we begin to blame God. We say, I didn't ask you for this. You promised this to me. But this is basically what she was saying to Elisha. She reminded him, I told you not to lie to me. I told you that it was too good to be true. And look what happened. I was right and you were wrong. We've got to get over that. We can't go to God and blame God for what he said, that it hasn't worked out the way he said it was. We've got to just believe the promise and be persistent in believing what he said, that he can do it the way he wants to do it. And also, when things don't work out, we begin to get upset with the person who gave us the prophecy. We said, no, that person must have missed it. Look how it's gone wrong. We were skeptical and they gave us this prophecy and now it's all happened exactly opposite to what they said. There must be a false prophet. We've got to be careful. We've got to guard our hearts, not get offended with the person who gave us the promise. Because if it's a real promise from God, if it's a true word from God, that thing, even in the middle of the battle, we use as a weapon, and we can say, but God said. So then Gehazi gets some instructions, take my staff, go to where the child is, lay my staff on the face of the child, and on your way there, don't greet anyone, don't stop. And I've preached this message so many times before. I wrote about this in my book, Wait, Pray, Listen, that here Gehazi gets his instructions to go to where this dead child is. And he says, don't greet anyone. It's like, even if you see your best friend on the road, don't even look at him, don't make conversation, you don't have time now. Just go and fulfill the mission I've given you. But the woman, the Shunammite woman, the mother of this child, is so insistent that she needs the one who gave her the promise. Not a servant, not even a guy who served Elisha. And the prophet's just given him instructions that if you lay my staff on the face of that child's going to live again. It wasn't good enough for her. So she used these words. She says in verse 30, and the mother of the child said, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. And those words were the words that got the prophet to arise and follow her. Elisha the prophet had him use those very same words when he was following Elijah. If you go and read in 1 Kings, when Elisha was following Elijah, before Elijah was taken up in the whirlwind, the chariot of fire, every time they got to a particular place, they were going on a circuit, a journey, and Elijah would say to Elisha, go and read it, because I don't have time to get into it now. Elijah would say, stay here, because I'm going on to the next place. And Elisha would say, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. Elisha was so determined to receive what he wanted from the prophet Elijah, which was a double portion of the spirit that was on Elijah. You know the story. If you don't, please go and read it. So he heard these same words being spoken right back to him in the middle of this woman's crisis. As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to let you go. You are the one who needs to come back with me so that I can get my son back. That's persistence, because she believed the promise. Even after she had said, don't lie to me, it's too good to be true, she held that promise in her hand. She knew this had to be God. She received her miracle. There's so many people who get miracles from God, whether it's healing, provision, or whatever, and then they come into the next crisis, the next battle, and they can't believe that God will do it again. It's a strange phenomenon that we have as human beings, that we can experience the greatest deliverance from God. We can have a fantastic miracle. We can pray for someone and see them get healed of cancer or a miracle. But when it comes to the next one, we have to start from the beginning again. And so, it's almost like we have to be continually plugged into the source of faith. It's not like one miracle just keeps you going for the rest of your life. And I think God designed it that way. But we're meant to be growing all the time in our faith, in our persistence in the middle of opposition, that what God said He's going to make happen. And that's what this woman had. So they go back to the child's, the Elisha's upper room. It wasn't the woman's bedroom or the child's bedroom. It was Elisha's. Chris Marie Yankees, the time I go on is usually 9 o'clock on a Thursday morning. But thank you for joining us. Even if you're late, it's going to be here and you can go back to the beginning of the video. And while I'm on it, remember, I posted something the other day about Facebook changing something, that the live videos will be live, but they'll only stay on the page for 30 days. I think that's going to happen from sometime in June, I think. So all the videos that you will find on this page, you can go now when you finished here, and you'll see all the videos, the short recorded ones, and every live session is in the video section on this page. But shortly they will all be removed. But I have a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to, and as soon as I'm finished this live, it gets put onto my YouTube channel and it'll sit there. So you never miss anything. You can go right there. You can see all the playlists. You can watch all the videos on YouTube if you miss them here. But even if you miss them here, up until 30 days from now, you can go back and you can watch all the videos. Just find the video section. Okay, so, and I'll try and give each one a title, and the dates are there. So, okay, so they get to the room. It was the prophet's room. This woman made sure that the promise was going to be put in the prophet's room, the upper room. You know, the upper room is there's a lot of significance about the upper room, because the upper room is where miracles happen. The upper room is where the secret place. It's where God speaks to you. It's where you share the intimate secrets of heaven and the intimate secrets of your heart with God. The upper room is where the Holy Spirit was poured out upon the people in the book of Acts, and the church was birthed. A place of fire, place of power, place of receiving refreshing. So here this woman received her miracle in the prophet's room, the upper room, and he was handed back to her. But now I want to end the story there so I can do this. The Tylers have still not arrived. They are now half an hour late, which is giving me time to give you this. So I started up by saying, how could this woman be so persistent? She knew she was going to get her son back if she got hold of the prophet, and she did. It's a fantastic story. If you look in my Bible, all the notes around that one story in 2 Kings chapter 4, it's like I've got notes all over the place. I can preach 10 different messages out of the story, and I felt that it was so important to finish it today. So how could she believe the promise in the Old Testament, and why can we not? Why is it so difficult for you and I today that we get a promise and then the devil opposes? Because you know the devil doesn't like you. What did I say? The promise you have is a threat to the enemy. The devil doesn't like you believing the promise. He wants to stop it right there, nip it in the bud. And when you believe the promise and you walk in it and you're waging war with the promise and you're praying it and you're telling everyone about what God has promised you, and you're living as if you're in it already, you're living by faith, and then the devil comes along and it seems so hard we go through this wrestling match. We go through this questioning, was that really God? Why is it so difficult for this thing to happen? it'll be more difficult to get into that situation of questioning if you know who God is. So I'm reading this book that was a gift to me, Christ the Healer by F.F. Bosworth, and I'm loving it. And there's a chapter in here about it's about how to appropriate the blessing of bodily healing, but I'm not going to talk about that. There's a part in here about the value of God's redemptive names. Now, I don't really go into all the well, if you know me, I love the Greek and Hebrew and the translating of those words. But if anybody had to ask me the names of God, I don't know them without having to look them up. So I found this very interesting. We're going to look at it. If we don't know who God is, in a battle, we're not going to know who we are turning to and the power of the King of Kings and God the Father to his people. So we're going to have a quick look at this. Listen to this. If we can really get an understanding of who God is, in the middle of a battle, you'll be able to stand easier. Because his name covers every situation that the devil doesn't like about us. So the first one is Jehovah Shammah. The Lord is there. And his names are all involved in the atonement, the price Jesus paid at the cross. So his names are areas and ways and blessings that we walk in today because of who he is. So the first one, Jehovah Shammah, means the Lord is there. I'll give you the scriptures, but I won't read it. Ezekiel 48:35. The Lord is there. You've got to know in your battle, God is there. Maybe waiting for you in the upper room, but he's there. Jehovah Shalom, we all know that one. The Lord is our peace. Isaiah 53 verse 5, the chastisement of our peace was upon him. Jehovah Ra'ah, or whatever, R-A-H. The Lord is my shepherd. You know that one, Psalm 23. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. Genesis 22:8. Jehovah Nissi, the Lord our banner or victor. Colossians 2:15, the Lord our banner, because Jesus spoiled principalities and powers at the cross. He dealt with the works of the enemy at the cross. So we have this banner over us, Jehovah Nissi. It's not just a flag over us, the Lord himself is our banner. Jehovah Tzidkenu, the Lord our righteousness. It's about our identity. Jeremiah 23 verse 6. Jehovah Rapha, we know this one. Exodus 15:26. The Lord, I am the Lord who heals you, Jehovah Rapha. And you can also find that in Matthew 8:17. For him himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. So there's 7 redemptive names. I think I read 7. Every name covers the areas of our lives that the enemy does not like and wants to, and is a threat to the enemy. Because when you have a revelation of who God is to you today, because of the price that Jesus paid, you are a threat to the enemy. And many times we don't really realize how much of a threat we are. And so when we receive a promise and the devil comes to try to steal, kill, and destroy from us, take that promise away from us, he's attacking our faith in who God is. And so if we remember that, listen, Romans 15:29, I want to read this to you because the fullness of the blessing of the gospel is ours. Romans 15:29. And I know we looked at a woman in the Old Testament, but we have to be able to apply that to our lives today to walk in the fullness of everything that God has paid, done for us. Fontini, nice to see you. Romans 15:29. But I know that when I come to you, I shall come in the fullness of the blessing of the gospel of Christ. What's the fullness of the blessing of the gospel of Christ? The blessing of the gospel of Christ, the good news of Christ, is what he did for us, his atonement at the cross, so that all these redemptive names that I've just read to you become part of our belief system. We walk in the revelation. I'm already healed. We walk in the revelation. The Lord is my, there's a banner over me that says victory. I'm not a victim. I'm an overcomer because of the redemptive names of God. Because the fullness of the blessing of the gospel of Christ. Is the fullness, I overflow with the blessing of the good news of the gospel. I think a lot of Christians have forgotten what the gospel is all about. We think, just go preach to everyone about Jesus. The gospel is the good news that it is finished, that we walk in this power of the Spirit today. We have a mission and a mandate, and we're so busy trying to, overcome our battles, forgetting the redemptive names of God. So we're so busy trying to overcome things ourselves here, and then we forget the fullness of the blessing of the gospel. We're meant to be full of revelation, anointing, authority, influence, empowerment, abundant life. That's the blessing, the fullness of the blessing of the gospel. So when I say to you, this woman in 2 Kings chapter 4, she believed the promise that Elisha gave her. Are we those people who say, I'm going to believe the promise? I believe that God said, I am your healer. I believe that God said, I'm with you. That's a hard one for people. Now, can you imagine the Shunammite woman, after her son has died, would she still, I'm sure the thought, while she was on her donkey cart or whatever she was on, she said, saddle up a donkey for me. So she was riding a donkey to go and find Elisha. We're on that trip to find him, because it wasn't just around the corner. I can't remember now, but it was quite a journey she had to take to go to get to Elisha, to fall at his feet. She would have thought, the thoughts that would have crossed her mind on the journey, I remember writing about this, I thought about this a lot, that when she got the promise, then the promise died, the son died, and she had time on the journey to think about things. She would have remembered, I stood in the doorway of my house, and Elisha gave me a prophecy that I never believed. I said to him, don't lie to me. I didn't even bring it up. He prophesied this thing himself. I didn't ask him for it. And I got it, and then I lost it. So she would have had to go through all the issues in her heart before she got to him. She would have thought, I was skeptical at first, but God still promised me this thing, this child, not this thing. And I got the child. I was skeptical, but the grace of God. I find when it comes to prophetic ministry, many times someone's standing in front of you and God gives you a word for them. And you can feel his heart for them. But he knows that they are skeptical, that they are going through issues, that they are offended about something. And he doesn't address those issues. He gives a word that melts the heart of the hardest hearts, because he wants to reveal his heart for them. He wants to say, I'm with you. I'm your banner. I'm the Lord who heals you. I'm your provider. I am your peace, and whatever else I read to you now. And so he brings a word across. Because if every time God gave us a word that pointed out what was wrong in our hearts, that, oh, you never believed me, but I'm going to prove to you that I can do this. God doesn't deal with us that way. His grace and his love just comes across, and he works in our hearts. And so this woman had the promise, and she's on this long journey on a donkey, and she would have been thinking all these things. What am I going to say to Elisha when I get to him? I told you not to lie to me, and she did. Are you one of those people who you have conversations in your head with people and they're not even there? You're thinking to yourself, if this person was here, this is what I would be saying to them. And then you even hear their replies in your own head. So you have this whole imaginary conversation with someone. This is what I believe this Shunammite woman was doing. And in amongst all of that, thinking this thing through, why has my son died when God promised me this son? Why? In amongst all of that, she would have remembered holding the promise in her hand. She would have remembered, I believed the promise when I got it. And that's that seed of faith that wants to break through in the middle of the opposition of the enemy. When you remember who God is, you remember what he said to you. You know how you feel right now, but you hold on to the promise and you go right back to the source. She took Elisha to the upper room. Maybe go back there quickly, 2 Kings chapter 4, and we're going to finish with this. and the Tylers have still not arrived. 2 Kings chapter 4, in verse 33, in verse 32, when Elisha came into the house, there was the child lying dead on his bed. If you only joined in later, we're looking at 2 Kings chapter 4, and then in verse 33, he went in therefore, shut the door behind the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. And he went up and lay on the child, and put his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself out on the child, and the flesh of the child became warm. He returned and walked back and forth in the house, and again went up and stretched himself out on him. Then the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi and said, call the Shunammite woman. It's exactly like full circle to when he first gave her the promise. He said to Gehazi, call the Shunammite woman. And she stood in the doorway, and he gave her the promise. So now he says again, call the Shunammite woman. So he called her. And when she came into him, he said, pick up your son. So she went in, fell at his feet, and bowed to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went out. She got her miracle back again. Elisha himself, when he went into the upper room, he put his eyes on his eyes, his hands on his hands, his mouth on his mouth. He did, and then nothing happened. And he went, it says he returned and walked. The flesh became warm, but that wasn't good enough. He walked back and forth in the house, and again went up and did the same thing. There might be some time when you get to grips with the fact that God gave you a promise, the enemy's trying to steal it. There's some time in between where you realize it's not enough just to go once and say, thank you, God, but God, you said. There's got to be some persistence. There's got to be some faith in action here. And so what I want to say to you is don't give up at the first sign of opposition, even if it looks like your promise has died. Because if God said it, God's going to do it. And so I believe in these days where, I've got 2 more scriptures for you, then we're going to finish. 2, yeah. In these days, we have to do some resistance because the devil doesn't like you. The devil wants to steal from you. The devil wants you to be hopeless and discouraged and feel as if you're a weakling. And if you remember the redemptive names of God and who he is to you, and the price that Jesus paid at the cross so you can walk in those and you can live in the fullness of the blessing of the gospel, you're not going to give up easily. You're going to be so persistent until you see the promise of God. So how do we do it? First one, Ephesians 4 verse 27 talks about Ephesians 4 talks about putting on the new man and all kinds of things. And then it says in verse 27, nor give place to the devil. We give place to the devil in the middle of a crisis when we let go of what God has promised us. We open the door to the devil when we let go. We say, I can't believe that anymore. We begin to blame God. We begin to blame the person who prophesied to us. And we say, I can't believe that anymore. And all the time God is saying, come on, stay in agreement with me. I'm doing something, but I need you to use the authority I've given you there on earth. I'm with you, but I need you to cooperate with the Spirit and use the authority and get out that promise again. I said this last on Tuesday at Prophetic School the other day. I felt that God said the church needs to rearm. And you know how we rearm? If you read my post the other day, I posted this up. We rearm by believing the promise of God. We get out our promises, we get out our scriptures, we get out the dreams in our heart again where we become offended. We repent of being offended with God, and we begin to use those things as weapons, and we begin to believe the promise. That's how we rearm. Instead of discussing all the problems, yeah, it will be as God has said. Instead of discussing all the problems and pointing fingers and getting into division and disunity, we go back to the source, we go back to the upper room, and we believe the promise. It's not what we see, it's what God has said. So we rearm that way. Then the next thing is James 4 verse 7. I think this is verse 6, yeah. But he gives more grace. Therefore he says, God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. Therefore submit to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. We have to do some resistance in this season. We have to be resisting the devil. And there's the promise. And he will flee from you. When we resist, the devil flees. How do we resist? Believe the promise and obey the word. Sometimes we overcomplicate all these things. I've got to pray for 2 hours now every morning, and I've got to do this and do that. It's simple. Believe what God said. Believe what he says in his word about who he is, about who you are. Believe the promise, and then obey the word. Cooperate with whatever he tells you to do, whatever word comes and he instructs you to do. If he instructs you to get up and pray for 2 hours every morning, then do it. There's a reason. But don't do things because you feel you have to, because somebody else did and they saw results. It's believing the word and obeying the word. So that's my message for you today. I did it all before the Tylers arrived. It's a bit frustrating because when they get you late, it means they're going to be here later, longer. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. Yeah, let me give you this. When we're believing the promises, there are promises in the word that are going to happen because God said. Here's one. Habakkuk 2:14. It talks about, in Habakkuk 2, it's about woe is the person who builds a city with violence and woe, bloodshed or something, and lots of woes. But then it says in Habakkuk 2:14, for the earth will, not maybe, the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. That's a prophetic word that has come. That's going to happen. We don't have to fight for that one. Rory pacing, I'm sure he is. We believe it because God said it. So the other promises in the word, by the stripes of Jesus, you are healed. It's like there are promises there that we can't tippex out or cut out of our Bibles, because God said it. So we have to be confident and persistent in believing for the blessings of God. The fullness of the blessing of the gospel is yours. You're not a wimp. You're not God has plans for you. So I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I'll keep you updated about going to visit the pugs in London. But I will see you. I think I'll see you next Thursday. I still have to record some bite-sized videos for up ahead. I'll do that soon. But please remember now, while you wait, go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's free of charge. You don't pay. You just have to like it. Then you'll see when you go onto YouTube, and most everyone has YouTube on your phone or whatever. When you go onto YouTube, you'll see I posted, there's a new video up. So subscribe there, but keep on joining me live here, please. Have a beautiful day too. Wendy, see you on Saturday. Debbie Bell, I'm telling you, I'm so excited about Saturday because I know God is going to do something. We've got some visitors, some new ladies joining us, some people who are bringing friends on Saturday. So let's see what happens. But I can't wait. I'm really excited about Saturday. I love going out to Somerset West and also to Constantia. I love what God has given me to do in this season. I really do. And if I don't get to chat to you personally at the meetings, if I don't get to sit with you and hear your story, I really wish I could. And maybe at some point we'll have smaller groups, divide things up into smaller groups, and then I can sit and I can hear everyone's story. But I do really, really appreciate all your support and coming to meetings and watching live. You make it all worthwhile. So, Chris Marie Yankees, I'm so glad you could join us today. So I'll keep you updated about things, and I will see you. I doubt that there will be a live, a recorded video tomorrow with the Tylers who are going to be here. And but I'll keep posting things. So thank you so much. I'll see you all soon. Bye.